a little bit about this class. In our education offering, we have several courses that are called certificated courses, and in the past, there were prerequisites to take the courses. If you wanted to take the course Self-Mastery or Financial Freedom, you had to have completed the first class, which was called Beyond Limits. It used to be called something else. But some people just didn't want to do that. They wanted to dive in at the point of education where they wanted to go. So our headquarters allows that, so you can now take self-mastery as your very first class. What we realized, though, was that when people start at like the second or third class, they sometimes don't have the vocabulary and the worldview of science of mind teaching, and so they can sometimes feel like they're out of sync with the rest of the class. So we've decided to offer this Art of Spiritual Living, a quick start guide to science of mind to help orient people. You know how every organization or every teaching has got its own language? Well, we have ours. So hopefully we'll introduce you to some of the language and some of the ideas. Now, this 1-hour class, it's 3 weeks long, it's not going to be an in-depth discussion, questions and answers. We don't really have the time for that. It's going to be more like a documentary. You're going to get the ideas, and there is help for you to explore it further. If this really resonates with you, then you know that Beyond Limits is going to be very exciting for you. Or if you want to take some more short courses, starting not this Wednesday, Reverend Barbara Leger is here this Wednesday, but the next Wednesday, on Wednesday evenings for the rest of the month, I'm going to have another 1-hour class about other aspects of spirituality. So there's a lot of free resources for you to become familiar with the teaching of science of mind. If this is exciting for you and you're getting a lot out of it, then you can consider enrolling in a class. The difference between a short 1-hour course and a long extended class is vast because you're together for an extended journey, and your classmates support you in spirituality. You have small groups, you have lecture, you have plenty time to ask your questions, and homework that can be reviewed by assistants. So you see, that's a whole new world. Still, we can get a lot done here in this documentary of the science of mind. I want to let you know that we are recording it, hopefully to be able to use it in the future. So that'll give you the information you need. If you don't want to speak up, just know that it is being recorded and speak if you want to. So whenever we gather as a group in Science of Mind, we start with, here's the first part of the language, with a spiritual mind treatment. In Sunday services, we tend to refer to it as affirmative prayer, because for some people the terminology is a little weird. Spiritual mind treatment, as somebody said to me, that sounds like something your hairdresser does to your hair when your scalp isn't healthy. A spiritual mind treatment, there's a very specific reason why we use that word to represent our affirmative prayer instead of just saying prayer. And the reason is because the word prayer is charged. It's got generations of meaning. Indeed, if you look up prayer in the dictionary, what is the first thing that pops up? Say it out louder. To plead, a petition, a request. And it sort of suggests a relationship with the divine, here to there, that is substantially different from the relationship in the divine that we recommend here. So, you know how it is, if you say a word prayer, people immediately go to the association of what it's meant to them in the past. It became very difficult to get people to drop the idea of asking a God out there as a form of prayer. So our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, there's the second bit of information. Our founder's name is Dr. Ernest Holmes. He borrowed the term treatment, spiritual mind treatment, from another discipline and used it because it separates us from the old idea of prayer. In the third week, we will look at that form of prayer, and I will list all of the ways that it is substantially different from regular prayer. It's not that we have anything against prayer of any kind. In fact, we practice many different kinds of prayer, but the backbone of science of mind is spiritual mind treatment. It's a method that anybody can learn to use and can be used for all kinds of wonderful things. So we'll get into that a little bit later on in week 3. If you miss a week in this course, no worries, just come to the following one and we will have the handout for you. We separated the handouts into 3 weeks so as not to overwhelm you. And you can always pick up one if you miss it, so don't worry about that. Now, the practice of spiritual mind treatment is very similar to meditation in that you want to prepare yourself for it. Sometimes when people arrive in a class like this, or especially if it's in the evening and they've had a very busy day and they've been taking care of their children and they're all harried and they get into class, it's like, okay, we need to adjust that a little bit to let the body arrive. And it is helpful for some people to sit, how shall I say, well, sit squarely, supported. There's no real mysticism about this other than that the body responds to us when we treat it well. And when we bring it into alignment and we open up our chest, now Mirka will tell you about that, right? Allow yourself to breathe and be present. The thought clarifies, it's just very practical. Then you give yourself a moment. And by arriving, I mean, let everything be. Especially, this is a good experiment. As much as possible, let outer movement cease. I mean, you can't stop breathing. You can't stop the movement of your mind, but you can stop this. And then watch how there's a stillness that arrives. Now it's time to begin, you see, and there's a difference in the atmosphere of the room already. So I will speak the treatment, the prayer, and invite you just to imagine that the words are being spoken silently in your own head, your own mind, or words similar to it. I like to close my eyes for spiritual mind treatment just so as to reduce the amount of stimulus, visual stimulus. There is only one Spirit, the living Spirit, Almighty. Almighty means it is all of the power that is. No other opposite or opposing power. Just the one eternal Spirit. Eternal means endless, forever and ever. Everywhere present. It, this living Spirit, is the source of everything. It is the intelligence of creation. It is the love of creation. So it is called all-including, unconditional, permanent. I recognize it as being present here as the divine. I am a part of this Spirit's creation. I identify myself with it. When I say it is everywhere present, I remember that means right where I am. And so I say, its love expresses through me as my loving kindness. Its divine intelligence flows through me as my own intuition, my ability to choose, to think, to learn. I am one with it. And this I hold to be true for every person here, one with the living Spirit. Having said that, I realize that something wonderful is happening right now. I am in the process of experiencing the expression of the divine as this class. So I call what is happening holy. And I let myself be available to the flow of this holiness. I am open, I am teachable, I am present. Having realized this, I'm filled up with rejoicing, glad to be here, glad to know this, glad to speak this word of prayer. And I remember that there is a spiritual law. We call it the law of mind or the law of love or the law of life. What I mean is that aspect of the divine that listens, responds, and makes it so. And so I bring this spiritual mind treatment to a close by saying, Amen, or and so it is. Okay. Now, I have this little worksheet for you, and I have something else as well. I didn't want to hand it out right away because if you're anything like me, you'd start reading it. And it's dense. It's a lot. It's more like something to take home. It's supplemental material. So not right now, but in just a moment when we're sharing, I nearly said the ushers, the teaching assistants are going to move among you to hand it out. And what it is that I'm going to hand out is the Education Department of Centers for Spiritual Living, the national movement. It's their outline of the principles and practices of science of mind. Very beautifully organized, so you can take that home as supplemental reading. But we're going to start easy and at the beginning. You'll see on the very first page, page number 3, the title is The Thing Itself. What do you think the thing itself is referring to? God's Spirit, the Almighty. So right now we have a third introduction. When it comes to the name of divinity, you've got options. All right? Because is anybody here challenged by the word God? So you don't need to use it. I mean, it is very specifically gendered towards male gender. It's very difficult to separate the word God in our culture from the male gender. So if that troubles you, don't use it. We heard spirit, we heard the divine, and this phrase over here was Ernest Holmes, one of my favorites that he used to describe God, the living spirit, the divine, whatever you want to call it. He called it the thing itself. There's a certain kind of weightiness to that I really like, and it is not gender specific. So keep that in mind, that this is an opportunity for you to start exploring what is your preferred word for the divine. So this writing says, imagine that the universe is a magnificent creation of a genius mind. Now, genius and mind have been capitalized. This is a convention in our movement that whenever we want to refer to God, we uppercase it, right? So that you know that that's what we're talking about, the divine. A genius mind. That's how Centers for Spiritual Living thinks of divinity. An infinite, immortal, everywhere present, single power responsible for all that is. Well, okay, but let's go back to you. What is your concept of divinity? Where did it come from? And is there room for you to reform it and grow it if necessary? Because that is the starting point for considering science of mind as a way of life. You and I and anybody who comes in here has to begin to get clear, to get honest with the divine, what I think it is. So a good way to start is, what was I taught it is? So it says over here, take a moment to write a few notes on what you learned about divinity growing up and what you have come to believe now. So, room for you to write at home, to journal, but I'd like you to talk to somebody today and take turns. Don't take up all of the time. Share with your partner. Just talk about your religion of origin, or maybe you didn't have a religion of origin. What were you taught about the divine? It could have been absolutely nothing, but just talk about where you started and what you've come to believe about the divine now. Now, just in case you're sitting there thinking, well, he's assuming I have a relationship or a concept of the divine, it might be atheist. You might be, yeah. Keep talking, mister. I'll see how we go with this. That's okay too, okay? So even if you feel like, the best I've ever got to was Star Wars and the Force, that's good. Just this is the opportunity to explore it. So now, here's the way it's going to work. If you absolutely don't want to talk to anybody, you can just write it. If you want to talk to somebody, but there isn't anybody around you, just stand, and then we'll be able to connect you with somebody, or one of the assistants will come to you. But take some time now to share your original concepts of God, the divine, and where you are now. And keep in mind, while you're doing that, those dense handouts will be given to you. All right. Stand if you need a partner, and begin. If you had a stressful introduction to God, there's a lot to work out. There's a lot of debriefing, and sometimes unpacking. In fact, some people have to go right out and fire God. The God of their childhood. And so build up the structure again, brand new, so it can take a little time. And why is it so important? Because the relationship you have in your heart and mind with the divine is everything. It maps out even how your prayer is going to work and how you expect your prayer to work. So, you can't take too much time figuring this out. One way to go about it is to sit down with yourself and say, imagine if all of the curriculum writing responsibility for the entire world was my responsibility. And I had to write the curriculum for religion. Well, what would I say? All right? That's a bit extreme, but you get the idea. Or you want to practice thinking that you're sitting on a late night show and the host says, so what is the divine to you? You want to practice till you get a facility, a clearness. How are you going to answer that? That matters. And it is also the first step of prayer. Spiritual mind treatment begins with your personal description of God. So it's a journey. You have to spend some time with that. And we invite you to think of, sometimes in our past, in some religious traditions, God is more distant than his or her creation. And so we invite people to begin the exploration with those big words, the absolute words, like absolute, like infinite, like all-powerful, like eternal, and everywhere present, and then to begin your ask yourself, if that is an accurate description of the divine, what would that look like, be like? What is that? What is eternal? Eventually, if you explore the everywhere presentness, if you accept the divine as an absolute power, you're going to have to deal with your relationship to it as being something really close. Well, that's not even enough. Something you can't escape from. Because you see, everywhere present, we take that seriously. We mean everywhere present. So right here. But not just here. There. And here. You know what I mean? And then here, even though it's getting dark, which is the way of the world, getting out of the light, it's still here. So, and then, then your intellect goes, but what about? Well, that's your journey. That's the figuring out part. How do I reconcile everywhere presentness with fluctuations of experience? Yay! In the Tao, it says something that's very useful. Help you to not get tripped up on getting the right definition. It says, the name is not the name. So you see, if you say the thing itself, well, today that's good. And then it goes on to say, and the one who says they know the name, they don't know the name. Because how do you capture that which is infinite in a word? So then your description of the divine, you can never land on it. You're always growing it, always exploring it, always finding new ways to express it, always finding ways to embody it. And then you can also see, if I start defining God, the divine, as regional, culturally specific, you get the idea. I might have to grow that. And I might have a habit of doing that. Like if you were raised in a tradition like I was, where the divine was very specific to that religion and not applicable to anyone else. You see, and so that was a cultural thing I had to grow out of. What does everywhere present mean? So if you want to explore it, if it's exciting to you, get a big pad and write down the divine and start collecting descriptions. Write down what it means to you. Go crazy. Spend a month on it. And then every description you come up with, remember the Tao. That description is invalid. Right? It's just valid for you at that particular moment when you conceived of it. It's like the hand pointing. So we use words to point to that which cannot be contained. We use qualities and words, and that's why, in our prayers, sometimes it's very flowery, it goes on and on. We're trying to attain the atmosphere, the feeling tone of the divine. All right, there's your homework already. Define God. Good luck. Now, I mentioned earlier that at some point you're going to have to reconcile your relationship with the divine. Like I'm standing in the heart of divinity. That's how I like to think about it. That's different from how I was raised. One of our most well-known educators, Eric Butterworth, he wrote in his book, God is in us, but not like a raisin is in a bun. You get that? Not like, oh, here's the God spot. The rest of me is filthy. Right? Not like that. The God or the divine is in us and us is in it. No separation. So now that implies a whole heck of a lot. Because apparently creation exists. Did you notice? So we must assume a creative nature. And if I'm in that, I must assume that's going on for me somehow. So we explore that in terms of the creativity of our thought. Because, you probably have encountered how powerful your own mind is. Have you ever scared yourself? Have you ever created self-fulfilling prophecies? There's a power to thinking that we explore. If it's very interesting to you, then you're going to love Beyond Limits because we deconstruct why do we think that our thought is creative and where are the places where apparently it's not. Didn't think you'd hear that from a Science of Mind minister. All right, so here's what it says. Imagine that you exist within the mind of the creative genius. Imagine that when you think, your thoughts use the same creative power that creates the universe. Why not? Imagine that a mental atmosphere surrounds your body, and that atmosphere reflects the tendency of all your thinking, attracting to you people and events that match what you are thinking. Now, wow. Scary. And sometimes we can see that, and sometimes we don't see it until later. And sometimes we can't figure it out. But it sure is interesting to think about. See why loving, generous people experience the world in a different way than people who are angry and selfish? Well, there's a question. Moving on. Whatever the case, it is most certainly worth exploring the changes that take place when a person consciously changes their mental atmosphere. We call that their consciousness. Christopher, I need another battery. That's why so few people do it, change the atmosphere of their thought, because it's easier to allow any random thought to enter your mind and to be entertained by it. Very few people take time to examine their thinking consciously. Oh la la. Here's the next thing for Science of Mind. While you're busy exploring God, and you're going to be learning how to do spiritual mind theory, in the meantime, you're invited to check up what's going inside your thoughts. And then the room empties. Now, this one is easier to just start practicing than it is to explain. So you can begin to practice. First, let me read the next part. Saying nice things and thinking good thoughts for 5 minutes a day isn't going to do much to alter your mental atmosphere or change your experience in life. In one of his books, Ernest Holmes said, imagine that there's like a psychic video recorder following you around all day, recording your thinking. And then at the end of the day, it sorts them out, positive, negative, positive, negative. Which way does the scale go? I've never forgotten that image. So there I am, I've like 12 hours of angry, negative thoughts, and I'm going to do an affirmation to neutralize it. Well, it is true that affirmative true thoughts are at a higher vibration, but I can see how I might have to do a little bit more than that. Okay. That's why so few people do it. It's so easy to just let the mind go on automatic. Now, this is not new to, Science of Mind didn't invent this. The idea that the mind, you can enter into a right relationship with your thoughts is as old as religion. The Hindus knew it. In fact, Krishna, talking to Arjuna, said, it's difficult because Arjuna says, how can you stop the mind from doing what it's doing? It's like the wind. It just goes where it wants. And Krishna says, yeah. Correct. And it can be done. So, that's the invitation. And so here is your invitation to take a moment to make some notes about the atmosphere of your thinking. Now, this you're not going to share with another person because it's so private. Is there anything you would like to change? What thoughts do you have about how making a change in the tendency of your thinking would be helpful in your life? There's a tiny little space for you to write your whole life out. So just take a moment to write in. So you see, let's just talk about the atmosphere of your thought. Atmosphere is like a weather system. Who's the guy in the Peanuts who walks around, he's got the cloud behind him? Linus. Yeah? He's got the dust. Pigpen, right. So he's walking around and it's just following him. Think of that as your thought atmosphere. Doesn't have to be dusty and dirty, but if you think about what do I dwell on? What are the things that show up in my thought atmosphere frequently that have the energy of worry, compulsion? Because all of that together creates a thought atmosphere. And Science of Mind suggests that you and I can change the direction of that through training. But first, you've got to become aware of it. And how do you become aware of it? You start to explore. And journaling is a marvelous way to explore. Tiny little bit of space to write down some thoughts about what makes the atmosphere of your thinking the way it is. And what would you like to change? If you're having a little difficulty coming up with what contributes to the atmosphere of your thought, try to review your self-talk. What do you say to yourself first thing in the morning? What do you say to yourself when you've made a mistake? Those sort of things. What do you say when somebody else makes a mistake that you think is idiotic? In the silence of your own mind, put that all together in a blender and call that your thought atmosphere. So from where I stand, I want to tell you what I'm seeing, what I'm watching. I'm seeing this. Because that's what we got to think. We got to think it through, right? And one of the things that happens when we start this is people become aware. I could change some things. Don't really know how to just yet. That's okay. You can't change everything in one hour class. But the first step is becoming aware. I could do this differently. I think that's a principle of the 12-step program. You can't fix something until you are aware that it is a problem. So if your mental atmosphere is filled up with blessings and kindness and goodness, good, terrific. If not, we're going to learn to do something about it. So far we have touched upon two core ideas of Science of Mind. The first one is the thing itself and what that means. The second one is the creative nature of thought, which could be explored in more detail. And the reason why this is so important relates to the third core idea. There's one mind, but it has two modes. Here we're going to explain that. Your surface mind is that part of your thinking where you are thinking your thoughts, knowing who you are, being aware that you're alive, where you make choices, all of that. The deeper mind is the receptacle, the catch-all for all that you've ever thought, felt, seen, heard, touched, tasted, smelled, or experienced. Imagine that also within it is the recorded thoughts and experiences of everyone who has ever lived. That's a trippy idea. So the idea that you want to become familiar with is, I've got one mind, but it seems to work in two modes. I can get a really clear example of that. Like when I get into my car, I make the decision, I'm going home. After that, it's automatic. It's a done deal. I'm not thinking change the gear. It's happening. Now imagine that there is an even more sophisticated aspect to your being, that you think a thought enough times, it goes on automatic. So the surface mind chooses it, thinks it, articulates it, gets clear on it. It sort of gets dropped into the deeper mind where some mysterious action goes to work on it. This is very important. Because if you habitually planting seeds of worry into your deeper mind, eventually it produces something. In fact, we have an image of it when we teach class of an iceberg. You see a tiny little portion of the iceberg. And underneath it, there's a huge mass of ice. The tiny little part on the top, that's your conscious mind. That's where you think you got it all going on and you know everything. But below the surface is this massive mind that has everything. Ooh. So what we learn to do is, using spiritual mind treatment, we learn to train ourselves to begin depositing, dropping, sowing a new generation of thoughts. The good news is, even if you have spent 40, 50, 60, 70 years really sowing seeds of discontent and terror, the nature of thoughts that are in alignment with spiritual truth is that they germinate faster. Yay! I'm not kidding. You'll see. All right. I'm going to make sure I don't run out of time. Oh my gosh, time flies when you're having fun. So we're back to the power of thought on the last page. So we're reiterating that second principle, the power of thought. Merely to abstain from wrong thinking, all these quotes are Ernest Holmes from the Science Mind textbook. Merely to abstain from wrong thinking is not enough. There must be active right thinking. We must become actively constructive and happy in our thinking, not merely passively so. And so this is to be taken with caution, because this is where we get into trouble, where people can start to get down on themselves. Because who can consistently think happy thoughts? It's a little weird if you do. Life is complex. He was trying to address a change in the mentality of the people of his time, where it was apparently characterized by pessimism, worry. Oh, just like today. So the idea is, he was like using a bit of a heavy hand to say you got to take responsibility and change the direction of your thinking. We also have to be careful that we don't get into self-blame like this if you can't. I mean, what happens? You wake up in the morning, like this morning. We woke up and there was a shooting, another shooting. And if you have a pessimistic, sad, depressed thought, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have to go going, oh my God, what have I done? That's not the intention of this. This is talking about developing a response mechanism to the world that favors elevated thoughts. Not thinking about what you hate isn't going to get you to love. So I'm not going to think about hate. I'm not going to think about hate. I'm not going to think about the bad things that are happening. You see what I mean? That it needs a more subtle tune. Okay. You must think consciously about what you love to experience a change. I must think consciously about it. So I always tell people, look, when I started this and I read this, I was desperate for a change in my life. And so I don't think I had anything to lose. So I just gave myself to it wholeheartedly. I practiced routing out of my thinking as much fear as I could. I wasn't always successful, so I would write out affirmative statements and I would stick it, remember Scotch tape on my car. I didn't have Post-it notes. It was everywhere I went, so that every time I felt my mind descending, I would look up and read an affirmative statement. I was a bit of a fanatic about it. I even wrote down affirmative statements, and when I was swimming, training at the gym, I left the piece of paper, and I would read the affirmation, and I would swim, and say it to myself over and over and over again, and swim back and come and read the next one. A little bit manic about it. But you see, I knew that where I was going in my thinking wasn't good. My thinking was a product of my family's worldview. Worry is good. Criticism is creative. Vengefulness is right. So it was very dense, and I was making some pretty bad choices for my life. So I went into it with a lot of hope. Now, some people, when they go into it, they start to become critical of themselves when they don't see results that they want. But I didn't have anything to lose. I mean, anything would have been good. If the sun just came up in the morning, I would have said that's a demonstration of good. So it's very important for you to take this at a level that can also be playful. You've got to play with your consciousness and not get down on yourself if you change your thinking and somebody steals your car. What did I do? It's my thinking. No, people steal cars. It's not your fault. But how do you spring back from that stolen car? See, if you're a religious scientist and you've been practicing, you reintegrate the experience. You don't take blame unnecessarily, but you respond proactively because you've been practicing talking to yourself. And we'll talk about that. So become more interested in your dreams and desires than you are in past regrets and failures. There it is. Ta-da! Like today, the pull is towards strategies to fix the nation. It's important. Here's the caution, that it doesn't take all of the time, doesn't take over all of our creative thinking. I must also be passionately interested in a dream of a world that works for everyone. I must describe it in my mind, feel what it might feel like, while I also take care of voting correctly. It's not either or. I don't hide out in my spirituality, but I don't abandon the power of my thinking. So if I'm sitting down and I catch myself getting worried and troubled, all right, get out a piece of paper and start describing, what does a world that works for everyone look like to me? And then the rule, I'm not allowed to use any negative references. Oh, that's fun. Do a Google search for something that brings you joy instead of the symptoms of a disease. Guilty parties. Release interest in negativity and drama and consciously seek out the inspiring and uplifting news. There are websites that specialize in positive news only. Affirmative, real news. Do you know that they struggle to survive? Because almost nobody wants to read it. Now, in Ordinary Goodness, the book I wrote, I did some research, a Russian online newspaper. They decided one day for their headlines to feature only good things that were happening. And in that one day, their readership plummeted. And the editor-in-chief said, and quote, almost nobody wanted to read it. Don't be that person, right? So don't be the person, because bad news is real and should be dealt with, but where's the parity? Where's the balance? Where's the sunset that you're looking at? Because if you and I lose hope and lose awe and lose love, it's all over, folks. Think about, talk about, and engage yourself in what makes you happy and feel loved. Well, within context, when you're dealing with a shooting in the neighborhood, obviously that's not appropriate, right? Grieving is a natural part of life. And if there is a place for you to bring balance, even if it's silently on your backyard, to bring your thought back and celebrate and nurture what turns you on, do it. We should daily feel a deeper union with life, a greater sense of that indwelling God. Now, this is homework number 2. So far your homework is got to come to terms with God. It's a lifetime journey. Number 2 and 3 is start observing your inner chatter. What's going on there? What would you like to change about that? That little bit of homework is going to be very useful to us in the last week when you write your own spiritual mind treatment. What do you want to change? Could be anything. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, and I want to talk to you about this piece I gave you, the Science of Mind principles and practices to apply those principles. If you turn to the second page, it says Science of Mind principles. There are 8, 9, 10 core ideas of science of mind. These form the foundation of all of our education classes. You'll see where it starts. 1. Guess what 1 is a synonym for? The One, God, the living Spirit. So everything starts with that 1. Everything else is an extension or a development from that. And you'll see you can take some time to read through these. And then the next 2 pages I found very, very helpful. It outlines all of the practices that we use at Centers for Spiritual Living to apply these principles. So it's a very nice document, especially if you are interested in taking another class at the center. Then when you read this and take it in, it's going to give you a lot of the vocabulary and language that will help you feel comfortable in the class. Most of our classes are focused on exploring these practices: visioning, treatment, circulation, meditation, self-mastery, inquiry. That's what our class work is all about, going deeper with all of these things. So this is what we're about. Okay, let's see. I daren't give you any more homework. I think that covers it. That was the documentary of Science of Mind, the first 3 core ideas: the thing itself, the creative nature of thought, and the 2 modes of your mind. Bueno. All right, see you next week.